Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio. I'm so glad you're here because we are in for a painting adventure. Somewhere in the shadows, this forgotten city waits to be painted into existence. Quiet, unfamiliar, and hauntingly beautiful. So what are we waiting for? Let's jump right in. For our supplies, we of course need watercolor paints and some watercolor paper. Now, I do have a bit of an outline sketch on my paper already. Having an outline of some sort for this piece actually makes it super easy because you basically just paint within the lines like you would a coloring book. We don't have a lot of super tricky techniques with this one. Now, you can imagine, draw, or sketch your own little cityscape, whatever you want to do. It can be similar to mine or it can be totally different. And for those of you that don't enjoy drawing or would rather just skip to the fun of painting, then I have good news for you too. I will have this outline available in my Etsy shop so you can simply print it out and trace it right onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. I'll leave a link for that in the description of this video, along with links and information about any of the other products you see me using today. All right, let me just pull out some clean water really quickly, and then I'll go ahead and tape my paper down using some artist tape just to help a little bit with the warping of the paper. Then lastly, we of course need some brushes to help us out with today. Let me see, maybe I'll pull out a number 3 round and maybe a little bit larger number 6 round brush. Most of the spaces we're painting in today are on the smaller side of things. But you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, we actually might want an even larger brush for the background wash. That's just going to help us get that job done a little bit more efficiently. And actually, just as a side note, I do have a quick and exciting announcement that many of you have been asking about. My 5-piece Craftamo brush set, which includes all 3 of the brushes we will be using today, is actually going to be in stock in just a couple of months, just in time for the upcoming Christmas season. I just got confirmation from Craftamo that they want to put out another batch of these, so make sure you pop over to my brush product page and get signed up to be notified when they become available again. I'll leave that link in the description of this video too, and I will also try to keep you updated in my videos of the progress and the release date for these brushes as well. But for now, back to the painting. First up, let's just get a few colors on our tray ready to go so that we can start painting in the background. Then we can work a little bit more quickly when it's time. A lot of times silhouettes tend to be more neutral and bland in the coloring, but I want to do things a little bit different today and make it more whimsical and colorful. So I'm just pulling out a good assortment of colors here, starting out with some ultramarine blue, some mineral violet, and some alizarin crimson. Okay, now these pure colors are probably just fine to use. In fact, any colors you pick are fine to use. I think I might change these up just a little bit though to make them a little bit more cohesive with each other. Maybe I'll take a touch of that mineral violet color and add a very small amount into the ultramarine blue. Now I think I'll take a touch of alizarin crimson and add some of that to the mineral violet. And lastly, I think I'll try adding in a touch of cadmium orange into the alizarin crimson. That looks pretty good, but I actually think I need some pure alizarin crimson as well. All right, these colors look good enough to put sort of a sunset background wash in here, so let's give it a try. I'll just rinse my brush out really good here really quickly, and then I'll take some water from my brush wash bowl here and just start placing that in the background sky area. I'm sort of going around the buildings and the tree in the foreground here, but I'm not being super meticulous about it. This is just a general placement for the sky wash. I am going to be keeping the colors for this area pretty light in value, so if I get a bit of color on the buildings or the tree, I'll probably be able to paint over them with darker colors later. Then after I've got the water put down here, I can start dropping in some color. And like I said, not a lot. I want to keep this fairly light in value, so add extra water to the brush or spread that color out through the page to keep it nice and light. Now, I think I'll sort of work my way from the top of the page down, and you can kind of just pick and choose what colors you want and where you want them. I've decided to start with the blue up more near the top left of the page, and then I'll transition to the purple color next, gently blending that into the blue a little ways. And I am choosing to just allow to let the colors fade out into almost nothing around the edges of the page to add that whimsical feel, but that choice is up to you. Now I think I'll start adding in a touch of the pink color next, blending that into the purple a little ways, or maybe even into the blue, just whatever. To make this feel more sunset looking, when I get down here closer to the bottom, I'll add in a little bit of that orangey pink color that sort of makes it glow. Now, as I said, I was trying to sort of fade out the colors on the edges a little bit, as well as generally paint around the buildings and trees. Of course, I didn't do that perfectly, but if I take my paper towel, I can gently dab off a little bit of the color in some of these places that I don't want it to be. All right, we need to let that dry a little bit, but while we wait, maybe I'll go ahead and mix up a couple more colors that we might need a little bit later on. So first up, I'll pull out some Payne's Gray. And then maybe I'll take a touch of Payne's Gray and mix it with a little bit of Burnt Umber. Now, like I say, we won't use these quite yet, but now we have them ready for when it is time. But I think we can go ahead and come back into our painting now and add some color into the bottom half of the piece. This is going to kind of be a reflection of the sky, so we'll actually be painting it in a very similar way. It doesn't have to look exactly like the top area. We'll just use that as sort of a guide to mimic. After I've got the water placed down here, then I'll start dropping in the color, blending it together until I get the look I want. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. Watercolor painting can be very fun and therapeutic, and I love helping people be able to learn how to paint something that they feel proud of. If you find you're enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. All right, this looks pretty good, but I think I need to add a little bit more blue or purple on this left side, so I might add just a hint more of that in really quick. Okay, good enough. I don't want to mess with this too much more or I will probably start making things worse. It's always good to know when to quit. I think I'll just soften up some of these edges with a paper towel really quickly and then we can move on. And actually, I am feeling a bit impatient today, so I think I'm just going to speed up the drawing process by using a hairdryer. Okay, I know this may not look like much right now, but the next few steps are really going to make this piece come to life. So now that this is dry, we can move on to painting in the more fun part of the piece, painting in the buildings and then the trees. And I might change up my colors a little bit, almost dull them down in fact, so that they will be a little bit different than the sky wash. I think I'll just add a tiny bit of mineral violet into these pinkish orange colors, just to change them up a little bit. I am also using the number 6 round foreground brush right now. This just kind of makes these seem more like shadow colors instead. And I think I'll also just mix up some of this blue and purple together for another different color as well. All right, this part is pretty simple and uncomplicated. I'm just going to start painting in some solid colors onto the buildings in the background here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use the wet on wet technique with these just so that I can get a nice even coat of color that blends well throughout the area. But you can do this wet on dry instead if you prefer, just whatever you're comfortable with here. And as far as the color to paint on the buildings, you can choose whatever you want. You can follow along with me and do something similar, or you can try something totally different. I'm just the guide, but you are the artist for your work, so you can do what you feel like your painting needs. The biggest thing for me as I'm painting these in is that I'm wanting to use a variety of colors to give the painting some interest. I'm not going to paint buildings that are touching or right next to each other exactly the same. They will either have a totally different color or at the very least a different value of color. You'll notice that none of these are super dark in value though. These are more of that middle value range. I used really light values for the sky and the reflections. The middle values will be in the center of the page here, and then I'll save the darkest values for the foreground tree that is coming up in a minute. This variation of values throughout the page just helps us create the illusion of depth and dimension, so just keep that in mind as you go. You will also notice me skipping buildings or jumping around a bit as I paint. This is just to allow for a little bit of drying time in between the buildings so that they don't all start bleeding into each other. We'll come back to the ones that we skipped after things start to dry. One last thing that I'll point out is that I am painting around some square spaces on the buildings that can represent windows. This is an optional thing. If that's too tricky or time consuming, you don't have to do this either. I personally like it because it adds more detail and creates more interest to the piece, but whatever you want to do. And because some of these buildings or spaces are getting a little bit smaller in size, you can do like me and switch over to the smaller 3 brush later if you need help with that. All right, at this point, we can just sit back, relax, and enjoy painting in the rest of these background silhouette buildings. Nothing too complicated here, just having fun with the painting process. Okay, great job. This looks pretty good so far. Let's continue on by painting in some of the bushes and trees that are in front of the buildings now. And the good news is that I will actually be painting these in just the exact same way as the buildings. I'll use the wet on wet technique once again, wet down the space, and then add some touches of color. I will use a variety of colors in the bushes, just like the buildings. So just use your artistic eye and do whatever feels like looks good, or follow along with what I'm doing. I think with some of these tree shapes here, I'll paint them a little bit darker in value to make them stand out a little bit more and add to the dimension of the piece. All right, now that we've got these trees, bushes, and buildings all painted in, let's add some reflections of these shapes into the water down below. Now, these don't have to be perfect in shape or color. I'll be trying to use similar colors from up top to down below, but again, this isn't perfect. These are just going to be very light in value, hints of resembling shapes from up above to give the illusion of reflections down below. Don't stress too much about this part. Now that I've got the majority of those reflections done, I think I'll just continue on with some of the foreground, more close-up reflections next. I'll use a slightly darker color for this. Maybe I'll try that Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber color here. I'll start out with a little bit of color first, but I can always come back in here and then add more later if I need to, especially right at the top where it will be touching the base of the trees from up above. Now that I'm ready to paint in the foreground tree, I'll switch back over to the larger number 6 brush, and I'm going to mix up a nice dark pretty color to use that will help this stand out from the rest of the page. Since this is the most foreground object in the painting, it should be the darkest and most detailed silhouette. I'll just mix up some mineral violet with some alizarin crimson again, but like I say, this is going to be a much more concentrated version with more paint and less water. And actually, now that I've said that, maybe I will take a bit of this color and add some extra water to use with it as well. That way, when we get to painting the tree, we can kind of have a graduation from light to dark colors. I'll start painting in the tree at the top with a slightly lighter, more watered down color mixture, but then as I continue down the tree, I'll begin adding in and transitioning to the darker color. right, that looks pretty good. It is time now to start transitioning down to the branches and the trunks of the tree next. So I'll just switch back over to the smaller number 3 round to help us out with this. I'll begin by painting these in using the same purple color as the leaves of the tree, but then as I continue downward, painting in the trunks of the tree, I'll start transitioning to the Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber colors to darken this up a little bit more. Then as I start painting in the base area of the trees or the bushes or the bank as you might call it, I'll continue using these nice dark brown and black colors to finish it off. All right, great job. Now, I still have some pencil lines here and there that you can still see, but I'm just going to really quickly take a good eraser and see if I can erase or even just lighten up some of those lines a little bit. Some of them might still be visible in the end, but usually it doesn't bother me too much personally. If you don't like having pencil lines, you could try drawing your outlines using watercolor pencils instead, and that might help a little bit with that. But make sure that if you do take an eraser to this piece, that it is completely dry before doing so. You don't want to risk smearing or smudging the paint after all your hard work. And that, my friends, is it for this colorful and mystical cityscape silhouette. I hope you had some fun today and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.